Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr, and we are back. We've been off for a little bit, but we are back again here. Now, you may have heard a lot about the Supreme Court in recent weeks, but they still have business to get to, and Attorney General Leslie Rutledge will be presenting Arkansas's case coming up this week, and she's actually so gracious enough to join us now here. Attorney General, I guess let's just kind of get right to it here with what this case is and what is Arkansas going to be presenting there in that Arkansas v. Pharmaceutical Care Management Association case.
Absolutely. Well, this is probably one of two biggest healthcare cases that the Supreme Court will hear this term. And the case Rutledge v. PCMA has to do with pharmacy benefit managers, which are essentially the middleman. And Arkansans, we passed a law in 2015, Act 900 of 2015, to protect Arkansas local pharmacies and to protect patients' access to health care. What the law simply requires is that our local pharmacies be reimbursed at a fair rate by pharmacy benefit managers. And this was necessary because we've lost 16% or more of our local pharmacies because they weren't able to keep up with the cost. I know when my daughter is sick, I want to be able to call my pharmacist and get a prescription on a Sunday night. That's what every Arkansan and every American deserves, and they deserve affordable health care and access to affordable health care. But unfortunately, PBMs have been blocking the road every step of the way.
Now I know part of their argument is the fact that that legislation that was passed kind of undermines a national law that was passed. How do you guys see how that interweaves in with this case?
Well, this case is, the question being asked is whether or not the Arkansas law is preempted by the federal law of ERISA. And we're arguing that it's not, that states should be allowed to regulate these pharmacy benefit managers. Again, they're the middleman that set the prices for our prescription drugs, that set whether or not you have access to use a local pharmacy or you have to use a mail order pharmacy. This case is about protecting patients' access to health care and defending our family pharmacies.
Let me get your... Go ahead.
Sure. This is going to be argued on Tuesday, October 6th. Unfortunately, with COVID, it will not be in person at the Supreme Court. However, there are plenty of public media forums where you can listen in. Nick Brawny, who's the Solicitor General, will be arguing that case on behalf of the state of Arkansas for me. We have been diligently preparing for a year now, and we are excited about the Supreme Court hearing this case, and we're excited about winning this case for all of Arkansas and all Americans.
Yeah, I was going to say, with it being a little different this go-around, I mean, it's not often you get to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court, but not to actually go to the Supreme Court and kind of just take all that in and just that atmosphere. I mean, how is that a little different for you guys, knowing that it's a little different here in this pandemic day and age?
Well, indeed, we were certainly looking forward to being in that incredible Justice building of the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. However, we are still going to argue and win this case from Little Rock, Arkansas, at the Attorney General's office. It's a little different preparation, but it's the same amount of preparation because we are going to be prepared to win, and that's what we're going to do. On Tuesday, we're going to argue this case before the Supreme Court of the United States. We're going to protect patients' access to health care, and we're going to defend our family pharmacies.
And quickly here, we're kind of bumping up on time, but I kind of want to just get your take, your opinion on the Supreme Court, since we're talking about the Supreme Court, that nomination process, as it's become kind of divisive. It's kind of a hot topic here in the past couple of weeks here. But what do you, from a law standpoint, think about this? Because many people are saying the president is well within his constitutional right to make that nomination now.
Well, he absolutely is, and it says that the president shall nominate and the Senate shall confirm the nomination, whomever the president nominates. And he has nominated incredible jurist in Amy Coney Barrett. I'm excited about her nomination. She has incredible experience. I was actually with the president the Wednesday before he made this nomination. I was in the White House with President Trump and AG Barr, and we were anticipating that she might be the one who was nominated that following Saturday. And it's just an exciting time. We look forward to the Senate confirming Amy Coney Barrett and having a full court at the Supreme Court. We know that this election cycle is tumultuous and that we have to have a full Supreme Court should anything need to go up before those justices. And what we can't have is a 4-4 split and our election hanging in the responsibility of the, say, Ninth Circuit, which is not going to agree with anything that is fair when it comes to elections. So we're hoping, again, that we're going to get that ninth justice affirmed very quickly. Amy Coney Barrett is an incredible judge, and I look forward to her being on the U.S. Supreme Court. Well,
we will definitely be keeping up with this case. Again, just like you mentioned, October 6th, that Tuesday, Arkansas will be taking on the PCMA. Attorney General Rutledge, we certainly appreciate the time. We will do it again soon.
Thank you, and let's keep our President, First Lady in our prayers as they are overcoming COVID. We just learned of that news, and I think it's important that all Americans, whether or not you agree with President Trump and the First Lady, that you pray for the leader of the free world, that he is healthy, and that we can finish out this election cycle and have a fair and honest election.
Absolutely. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, we appreciate it. And when we come back, the heads of the Democrat and Republican parties here in Arkansas react to an interesting presidential debate. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Come and enjoy a new experience in shopping for your home. At Aladdin Rugs and Home Decor, we have over 5,000 rugs in the latest colors and styles. Bring your pillows, your pillow shams, and sizes. We will help you select the perfect rug. We're #1 in customer service with 15,000 square feet of rugs, unique home decor, wallpaper, and flooring. Remember, buy today, take it home today, and save. Why wait?
Hi, I'm Carrie McCoy, owner of theflagandbanner.com. Whether you're sailing a boat or have a boat for sale, we have all your flag needs covered at theflagandbanner.com. 800 West 9th Street in downtown Little Rock. Showroom open Monday through Saturday.
I'm Joyce Elliott, and I approve this message. I also approved police pensions, raises for the state police, increased funding for 911. And I voted to make sure our law enforcement officers have the tools they need for their safety and ours. My record is proof. I do not support defunding the police, and French Hill knows it. Lies and dirty politics won't keep our streets safe, Congressman. Working together will.
Custom Landscape and Nursery is located 20 miles outside of Conway. We're an 80-acre nursery. We grow 75 to 80% of our material ourselves, so it's acclimated to our climate, which is a little bit different than the material that's brought in. I know when people come out to the nursery, they always refer to the fact they've really never seen a nursery like this. I'd like to invite y'all to come out and to check out the nursery. I promise you it'll be a nursery like none you've ever seen before. Just visit our Facebook page or our website at customlandscapeandnursery.com.
Come to the Pratt Road Outdoor Flea Market this Saturday and Sunday, rain or shine. 3 pavilions of vendors selling clothing, household items, antiques, toys, and much more. Conveniently located right off I-530. So come see us this weekend at the Pratt Road Flea Market.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. Some call the first presidential debate a hot mess dumpster fire aboard a train wreck. Very fitting. Well, here to try to make sense of all of that, and if there was anything to actually glean from the first presidential debate, our top dogs from the Democrat and Republican parties, Chairman Michael John Gray, you see him there on the right, for the Democrats, and Chairman Doyle Webb for the Republicans. Gentlemen, we appreciate the time here. Chairman Webb, I'll start with you here. Just initial thoughts that you took away from that first presidential debate.
Well, it was certainly a debate in which personalities came out. Unfortunately for the American people, it was not a debate that you could understand what Vice President Biden hopes to do as president and that what President Trump had done as president and what he hopes to do in the second. I'm hopeful in the next debate we'll get to some of those substantive issues.
Yeah, and Michael John, for you as well, it just kind of seemed like everything seemed to be going fine with the decorum, but once one started kind of going, it just kind of went downhill from there. You know, kind of what did you take away?
Yeah, what you're saying politely is once the president got rattled a little bit, things started going downhill. I think we're all being very gracious to call it a debate. It was not a debate. It was a free-for-all. Nobody won it, most especially not the American people, most especially not the young voters or the young children that aren't even voters yet that have an avid interest in this. And to see that kind of behavior sad. But let's not call it what it was. The president set the tone. Vice President Biden joined right in. Will not take that away. But there was one man responsible for the tone of that debate, for the ill behavior, for the things that do not reflect and do. I don't want my son seeing that that's how the President of the United States should behave. So, yeah, Mr. Chairman was exactly right. Every time that Joe Biden attempted to talk about the issues, the President used his only resource when he doesn't have the information or the data to back up what he's going to do, is he went on a rant or a bully, and it was embarrassing. And I would hope that the decorum in the next debate from both members of the debate is better.
Now, let me get your take on this then. We'll kind of move along here. Do you think the town hall format is going to be more conducive to actually, have both candidates actually put out plans, philosophies, et cetera, et cetera? Because to me, it feels like in that town hall, you kind of have one guy standing addressing the crowd and the other guy just kind of sitting in the background, sort of waiting his turn. Do you think that'll be a little bit of a better format, despite both of these guys being big personality guys?
Let's hope so. Everybody's been tough on the moderator of the last debate, including myself. But when you have the President of the United States sitting there acting like my 6-year-old when I tell him it's bedtime, it's hard for who's a moderator to shut down the President of the United States. So let's hope that the format's better. Let's hope that it's conducive, because unfortunately, the Republican Party is making a lot of gains on not talking about the issues, not talking about how they're going to make people's lives better. And so I would love to see an opportunity for both candidates to get to talk about, one, what they haven't done to make the lives of Americans better, and for the other, what, when he is elected president, he can do to make our lives better. I really hope that format facilitates that better. Yes, sir. Hey,
Chairman Webb, your takeaway on that. I mean, do you put a lot of this on Chris Wallace, and even kind of going forward, do you think that town hall format, like I said, will be a little more conducive to actually addressing some of the issues?
Well, certainly, I think the town hall will be very conducive to each of the candidates presenting who they are and what they hope to achieve in the next term. I do see failings of Chris Wallace. I think some of his questions were loaded. I don't think his questions were always fair. I expect the chairman to blame Trump, but, and I'm not going to blame Biden for his lethargic activity, but, you have to see that the president loves this country. This president knows this is a make it or break it election for this country, and he is intense. He loves it, and that love shows by his aggressive nature.
I didn't feel any love in that, Jay. I felt, one man on that stage is president now, at least in the short term, and he was responsible for the tone. He was responsible for the behavior. We don't get to blame it on someone else for not controlling us better. I won't say whether he loves or doesn't love America, but I can tell you Americans on both sides of the political aisle did not come away from that debate feeling loved. I promise.
Well, and now going forward here, there's still 2 more of these, also a vice presidential debate. Do you think that just the reaction and the way that this one played out, do you guys think that going forward now that this is actually going to hurt viewership going forward? And I know there's always sort of a natural drop-off in viewership because a lot of people tend to think like, oh, we're going to just sort of cover the same things. But, considering nobody really got a lot out of this one on either side and just the way everything sort of unfolded, do you think this is really going to hurt those debates going forward, and even the vice presidential debate, where you would probably expect there to be sort of more of the decorum and the norms in those two?
I hope not, but it definitely could. I think that it was everything that was wrong with politics. And the rhetoric we've seen for the last 3.5 years is everything that's wrong with politics. The name calling, the finger pointing, the acting out. people want to hear how you're going to make their life better, what you're going to do for their children, for their grandchildren. And after they saw that, I wouldn't blame anybody for not tuning in, but I sure hope they do. And I hope that both candidates and Senator Harris, when she goes against Mike Pence, I guess, is still the vice presidential candidate. When she, I hope they will listen, because I do believe that Vice President Biden and Senator Harris have some good ideas about how we can move our country forward, how we can bring our country back together, how we can say that none of us are perfect, but as long as we're willing to condemn the actions of white supremacists, if we're willing to look inside ourselves and see that we need to come together and make this country better and not fan the flames of our division, and I think they have a plan to do that. So I hope people will tune in and see.
Chairman Webb, quickly here, we're kind of bumping up on a break here, but how do you think this will affect just sort of the viewership and just the attitude going forward here with the next 2
Well, I actually think viewership will continue to be maintained. It'll drop some, but as we get closer to the election, people tune in. To get back on the vice president, you know, you don't call the president a liar and you don't tell him to shut up. You know, I heard that said one time at a joint session of Congress, and that person was reprimanded for calling the president a liar. And so, once again, let's get away from the blame game. Let's look to see what each candidate has done, what each candidate plans to do, and move this country forward so that people can make an educated choice on November the 3rd.
Hey, Jay, I'll say that Vice President Biden should not have used the word shut up towards the President of the United States. No matter how much you feel about him, he's still the President of the United States. But I would invite Chairman Webb to offer that President Trump should have, instead of encouraging a white supremacist group to stand by, should have probably condemned their actions. And I'd certainly give him that opportunity to say that.
All right, actually, hold on there for just a second. We're going to take a quick break here, and I actually do want to bring up that point here, and I can give you guys both a chance to kind of react to that here in just a second. So stick with us here. Capitol View, we've got much more with Chairmans Webb and Gray coming up.
Bill's Fence Company is established, dependable, and trustworthy. From wood, iron, chain link, vinyl, gate operators, and more, Bill's Fence Company does it all. Whether it's a commercial or large residential project, call Bill's Fence Company today to schedule a free estimate. Financing options available.
There are now more options than ever to enjoy Tzatziki's. Our Mediterranean menu is full of healthy and original favorites that are available for dine-in, delivery, takeout, curbside, and drive-through at select locations. We've implemented safety procedures to protect both our guests and our crews. Order online at tzatziki's.com or download our app today. Thank you for your continued support.
Saracen. Long before our time, Chief Saracen, the Quapaw Nation, knew that building something great all starts with a dream. A seed. And with some nurturing and a lot of hard work, that seed can grow into something mighty. It's a dream becoming reality, a new excitement, a new prosperity, a new future. And now, we invite you to come celebrate new beginnings with us, because we're returning home. On October 20th, Arkansas's largest construction project becomes the state's most exciting entertainment destination. Be part of the action starting Tuesday, October 20th in Pine Bluff.
Joyce Elliott says she supports common sense measures. That's a joke, but it's not funny. Elliott stood with Defund the Police protesters. She is supported by liberals who want to slash police funding. Less police, longer 911 response times. Ask Elliott, what should we do if someone's breaking into our home? Because 911 might be busy if Joyce Elliott wins in November. Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Eating right and improving your health is always easier when you have a little help. For everyday tips to make sure you're living well, go to KARK.com and click on the Keep On Amazing tab. Brought to you by Baptist Health. Keep on amazing. You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. More with the chairmans of both the major political parties here in Arkansas. You see Chairman Webb there on the left, Chairman Gray there on the right. And Chairman Webb, I do want to kind of bring up what Michael John brought up going into the last break. There is, you know, I've seen a lot of interpretation of when Chris Wallace did address the president to specifically denounce white supremacists. And, I mean, he kind of tiptoed around it. Sure was the language that was used, and a lot of people kind of, again, that kind of is open for interpretation. I know he kind of came off flippant about that subject matter. What was your takeaway from that interaction there, and how he said, you know, stand down, stand by?
Well, you know, the exact words I can't get into, but I know that in the past, on numerous occasions, the president has called these hate groups, whether they're white supremacists or KKK or Antifa, they have no place in America, in a civilized society. Racism has no place in this country. Now, I think that the president said, sure, and he might have didn't use the word stand down. I'm not even sure that's the right word. It's like the president was in charge of the supremacist groups, and he's not. He's the president of the country. He wants to end racism. If you look at the things that he has done in the African American community, there's no way that you can say he's a racist when you look at the First Step Act, when you look at opportunity zones, when you look at the lowest unemployment record in decades. You cannot say that he is anti-African American or that he is a racist in any form.
Jay, I want to be real clear. I'm not one to speak to the heart of someone. I can only speak to the actions and the behaviors that they exhibit. So I am not here to say that the president is a racist. But what I will say is that he has fanned the flames of racism, that we need our leaders to bring people to the table together. We need leaders who say that we don't all agree, but when things are wrong, we're going to say they're wrong, and we're going to build back better. We are not going to continue to create division. Mr. Chairman, the words were stand down and stand by. So once again, I will give you the opportunity to not speak to past actions, but to the very national television that people, young people all across this country saw when Vice President Biden told the President of the United States to shut up. I feel that was out of decorum as how you address the President of the United States, whether he needed to shut up or not. And so I would give you the opportunity once again to say that asking a white supremacist group to stand by and stand down should immediately be condemned, and that is not the kind of language we need. That is not how we bring our country back together. And I'd give you the opportunity to agree with that.
Well, if you'll agree with the fact that your candidate failed to condemn Antifa and the leftist groups, he didn't even respond to that. Okay.
I don't think he had
so once again, I'm not going to get into the argument about it. The record is clear on the president. All you have to do is look at what he's done in the past. Sometimes you get your words mixed up. Sometimes I might get my words mixed up. I'm going to look at what he did. The proof is in the pudding.
Well, so number one, I don't think President Biden got an opportunity to describe what you're describing because I think the president was still talking and a little angry. But the president referenced a specific group and asked them to stand down and stand by. So what I'm asking you is, would you not say that that is not the behavior or the language that we would like the president of the United States to use to tell? Because here's the deal. I know I've gotten my words mixed up before, but I have never asked a white supremacist group to stand by and stand down because I may need their help. I've said things that have been taken out of context, but that one's really clear. So it's not really an argument, sir. It was on national television. A lot of people are upset about it. Your party is definitely gaining, and we've seen it in last election cycles, from fanning these fires of division. And so we're on statewide television. I'm giving you the opportunity as the head of your party to say that has no place in our party, and we don't appreciate that kind of language being used by the head of our party.
Racism has no place in American society. It doesn't matter whether it's in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the Libertarian Party. It has no place whatsoever. And your candidate, as a matter of fact, said if you're black, you ought to be voting Democrat. You know, what racism is there, okay? So, can you not condemn that issue as well?
Heck no, Mr. Chairman. I think if you're black, white, red, yellow, male, female, 18 to 80, you should be voting for Vice President Biden. I absolutely agree with that. But what my presidential candidate didn't say was ask a white supremacist group to stand down and stand by because he might need their help. And that's where we are. And it's a simple question. And you're the head of the Republican Party in Arkansas. And I'm asking you, do you support that kind of behavior, encouraging a white supremacist group to stand down and stand by in case he needs their help? Do you condemn that kind of behavior?
As you started your conversation, you don't know a man's heart, okay? I can look at his actions and know what his mind is and what his heart is. He said, sure, what word do you want me to use? Okay, he was there. He was condemning that action. He condemns all extreme groups' actions where they involve racism. Okay.
All right, guys, I'm going to jump in here because we are bumping up on time. But hey, we've still got plenty more debates for you guys to kind of go at each other. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I feel like we got more out of this than we did actually that presidential debate here. But again, Republican Chairman Doyle Webb, you see there on the left, and Chairman for the Democratic Party, Michael John Gray on the right. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time, and we will definitely do it again after one of these other debates. Maybe we can actually talk about some issues.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you, Mike. John.
All right, y'all take care. All right, we are back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Okay, so this gal comes in. She's in tears when she walked in the door. She tells me, I've got a trip coming up. I'm going to Turkey. I'm going to be walking and walking and walking, and I can't walk, and I don't know what to do, so help me. And I helped her. She called me a couple of weeks ago. She had the time of her life, virtually pain-free, and I had saved her life in her mind.
See for yourself with a free personalized arch support fitting at the Good Feet store.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And that is it for this week's edition of Capitol View. We're right back here next week with an all-new Capitol View. Make sure you get the Capitol View podcast wherever you get your podcast. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will see you again next week.